Monster is Gröna Lund's newest roller coaster. It opened in the summer 2021. It's a B&M invert, kind of that new standout ride at the park. Before, they didn't have too many roller coasters that were like large and intimidating. You know, a lot of them err on the family side of things. Monster is a thrill coaster, and if you've been to Gröna Lund, you know how small that park is, how little land they have to work with. Everything kind of weaves around each other. Monster is no different. The use of space on Monster might be the most impressive thing about it. How Gröna Lund fit this ride into this park is absolutely insane. And the crazy part is, this was my second visit to Gröna Lund. When I walked in, it looked like Monster had been there forever. You would never know that it was a fairly recent addition. It just works in this park. So in this review, I'm going to be talking about everything that you can expect with this ride should you go out here to ride it. We'll walk through the different elements and give the roller coaster a final score at the end of the video. But yeah, right away, I gotta say that Monster's presence in this area is just really awesome. You can see this roller coaster from pretty much the entire right side of the park, just weaving all around you, going over your head, everything. And Monster has a subtle entrance too. They placed it right in the corner of this building. It's not overly flashy or anything. It looks like you're almost entering a store. You go up some steps, there's an outdoor portion of this queue, and then you start to descend down. How do you fit an entire roller coaster station when you don't really have any land to work with? You put it underground. You drop down below the park and enter what appears to be a nice movie theater. There's posters all up around the station, some cool lighting, there's this really nice clock. It's a really cool atmosphere. The one part about this though that I was kind of laughing at is they have some TV screens up on the wall kind of telling you about the attraction, and they call Monster the king of roller coasters. That might be a bit of a stretch, but I admire their boldness. Do I agree with it? Not the slightest. But whatever, let them have their fun. Like every other B&M invert, Monster has 4 cross seating. This is the traditional over-the-shoulder restraint, not the vest restraint like you see on Banshee. Monster also has a slightly shorter train than some other inverts. This is 7 cars. And as with most other roller coasters, I would recommend riding in the front and the back. Overall, I would say I like the front better, but I think the back is best for the drop because of how it whips you over. But Monster really benefits from all of the scenery, the fact that you're flying over the park, and because so many of the other rows just have obstructed viewing, the front is really where you can see all that, so that's why I recommend that spot. So when you dispatch out of the station, you're going to take a left-hand turn and you start to rise up out of the ground. And this is a pretty steep but short lift hill. Now in actuality, it's not really short, it's 112 feet tall, but it feels short because of how quickly you climb up to the top. Fairly quiet lift hill too. So many of these other inverts are really loud, but Monster is not, which I appreciate. And when you hit your peak, Monster does not have a pre-drop like most other inverts. So if you've experienced Banshee at Kings Island or Osiris at Parc Asterix, you're really going to know how this is going to feel because you crest over and start to immediately descend into your drop. And this is part of why I recommend the front. The view going over the top is awesome because Monster faces the water. Gröna Lund has water directly on one side of the park, and because they're located directly in Stockholm, I really like this view that you briefly get there at the top of Monster. And then you get suddenly thrown to the left. It is very quick and unexpected. That for me is the best part of the ride. In my opinion, it's the only standout moment of Monster. It's also pretty forceful right when you get to the bottom of that drop. And while I'm not an engineer, I can also appreciate how they managed to build this drop because Monster has 3 different large columns that they use to support the track during this experience. And this first drop is where you can see the first one. It kind of wraps all the way around it. It's a very odd looking support. You definitely don't get that on other B&Ms, but you can see how they're able to utilize them to make this ride experience work. It's pretty cool. At the bottom of that drop, you get real low to the ground and then you rise up into your first inversion. This is also my favorite inversion on the ride. It's perfect 0G roll floater. You just smoothly slide through this. You're like absolutely weightless. And then following that, you rise up into a junior Immelman. And this is good. I do wish that this turn out of it was a little bit snappier. It lacks the punch that I was expecting. You know, when you look at Monster from off the ride, it kind of reminds you of the way the Batman the Ride clones look. You know, that's a very old school B&M invert. Monster is very much a new generation invert. So it was around here during the ride when I started to realize that Monster does not have the forces that those older rides have. Like, I would argue that Jetline, the Schwarzkopf family coaster, is more forceful than Monster is. But that isn't necessarily a bad thing, because I imagine what happened is the people at B&M probably realized that a lot of their older inverts were too forceful for like a lot of people. Like, obviously, as an enthusiast, I love that sort of thing, but I imagine that they're probably trying to make their newer inverts a bit more accommodating for a mass group of people, which I feel like you succeed with Monster. I feel like Monster is a bit more re-rideable, you know? after one, maybe two laps on one of those older inverts, a lot of people are going to tap out. Like, it's too much for them. And Monster does not have that crazy intensity that those other ones have. So for that reason, I would compare Monster most similarly to actually Banshee. Monster's smoother than Banshee, but the way it rides on the track feels very similar. I would say it even sounds exactly like it. Monster doesn't have that same roar that those other inverts have. I don't know if it's because they filled the columns with sand or something, or what other changes they made, but even though it's smaller, I like to refer to Monster as Swedish Banshee. Before we continue with the rest of the layout, the one other thing I'll mention here about Monster that I think is pretty interesting, most B&M inverts go into a vertical loop after the drop. Monster does not. Monster doesn't even have a vertical loop. It's the only B&M invert that doesn't feature one, which is super weird, but think about it this way. When you only have a limited amount of space to work with, you probably have to rely more on turns, and you can do that with some of these inversions, and a vertical loop is just placed in one spot. So it's a pretty interesting design choice. I think it's cool. Monster still features several other great inversions, the next of which is coming up. This is a corkscrew. This was fun, but I can't help but wish it was snappier. Again, I hate to bring up the Batman clones again, but those just like whip you through those corkscrews, and this element in my opinion was a little bit underwhelming. Following that inversion, you bank to the right past a building, and then you twist to your left around your second very large support column. This is a very tight helix. Think of how many roller coasters put the helix at the end of the ride. For Monster, it's in the middle, so you actually have quite a bit of speed going through this. And then that's when you enter your final inversion. This is another corkscrew. You bank to the right through a small tunnel, pop up into a spot where you sort of get a little bit of airtime, maybe in the front. You're flying over the midway around your third and final large support column, right past Jetline and the Wild Mouse, and then you slam into your brakes. And the brakes actually are one of the more unique aspects of Monster, because you start out completely level, and then you start descending downwards. That's of course because the station is underground, so a good portion of this brake run is slanted. It's really kind of cool, especially when you're standing off to the side and you're just watching the train dip below you, and then you level out and park in your main holding area while you wait for the train in front of you to dispatch. And that's the end of the ride. I liked Monster, but I didn't love it. And part of me thinks that that's because of my expectations. It was a little strange riding this roller coaster because it wasn't at all what I thought it would be. So maybe that's why I was a little bit underwhelmed. But don't get me wrong, Monster did grow on me. I still don't think it's incredible or anything. Like, it doesn't place high on my list of top inverts. But I have a lot of respect for what this ride does. I mean, the fact that it exists at all is pretty insane. I think I just expected it to feel like a Batman clone, and it didn't, which is fine. Again, I believe that this is going to be a lot more re-rideable. You know, Gröna Lund was likely looking for that standout ride, and to some extent, I think they got it. But for me, this didn't feel like a signature ride. Like, as weird as this sounds, Monster felt like a number 2 signature ride in a park that doesn't currently have your number 1 signature ride in the park. I imagine that's what their next edition is going to be. We know Gröna Lund is going to be expanding it. It looks like they're going to be getting a Vekoma tilt coaster. In my opinion, that's going to be like the ride of Gröna Lund, and then Monster will be your number 2. One final thought I'll say before I give Monster a final score. I made some comparisons to Banshee earlier. If you've listened to me talk about that ride, probably my biggest complaint about it is that the roller coaster is too drawn out. Like, I feel like inverts shine when they're tighter and more compact. Monster feels like a new and improved version of Banshee. Plus, it doesn't have the vest restraints, which is nice. So I do place Monster above Banshee. If you're a big fan of that ride, you're probably really going to like this, especially if also some of those older inverts are like too much for you in terms of forces. So I applaud B&M and Gröna Lund on creating a ride that I believe is going to please a wide variety of people. I imagine that the roller coaster has been very well received since it opened, and now that I've seen Gröna Lund with Monster, I can't imagine the park without it. So for Monster's final score, I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. I think the thing I like about it mainly is its presentation. I was shocked when I found out this park was getting a ride like this because I had seen what the land looked like before, and I was like, where are they even gonna fit it? And so I think it is mad impressive that this ride got built here. And so to anyone who works at a park that is tight on space and says, oh, we don't have room for anything, I call your bluff. Take a look at this ride. What Gröna Lund managed to do here. If they could fit in this ride, then I think anything is possible. So let me know down in the comments below if you've ridden Monster at Gröna Lund in Stockholm, Sweden. If you agree with the points that I brought up, if you think there's anything I missed, be sure to post those down in the comments below. And of course, stay tuned for more coaster reviews here at Coaster Studios. And I'll see you next time.